With about 16 months until the election, one political scientist is predicting what the party will come out on top when voters head to the polls.
According to Rachel Bitecofer, barring a, quote, shock to the system, President Trump will lose his re-election bid and Democrats will reclaim the White House. Rachel joins us now via Skype to expand on that prediction. She currently serves as the Wasson Center for Public Policy's Assistant Director, and she also teaches political behavior, campaigns, elections, and political analysis at Christopher Newport University. Great to see you, lady.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
All right, so tell us about your model and why you have so much confidence in this prediction.
Well, I'm so glad that you served me up that nice fat softball there, because the reason I have a lot of confidence in this model is I used it to predict the results of the 2018 midterms almost perfectly 4 months before the actual elections themselves, when for many of these House races, candidates were still being determined through the primaries. And I come out just kind of out of left field into the world of the political forecasting world when the big boys were talking about whether Democrats could actually pick up 23 seats that they needed to take control, and make my debut by saying, no. They're going to take the 23 seats. The question is how many on top of that they're going to take. And my guess, somewhere around 40, right? I said 42 seats. And as we all know, Democrats picked up 40. It might have been 41 if not for the malfeasance in the North Carolina 9th District. And at that time, I got a lot of blowback. Oh, this is crazy. You can't make predictions like that. My model is completely different. It uses demographic and polarization to predict election outcomes. And that's how come I can tell you 16 months out to what the outcome of this presidential election looks like.
So, Rachel, just explain the fundamentals within the model. What are the variables which cause you so much confidence in what you're predicting?
So this model originates theoretically in the post-Trump environment. When we looked at 2016, I had said to people, Trump should win. I was definitely in the camp, or Clinton should win, definitely in that camp. But I kept saying, but the one thing that could happen is Democrats get complacent and they don't show up to vote. And you see a lag turnout for African Americans, and you see these progressive Bernie-crats unwilling to vote for Clinton, especially amongst millennials. And that could be enough in places because of polarization. Republicans are going to fall in line behind Trump no matter how awful he is. That it will tip the election, right? So once that happened and he got elected, I happen to reside in election nerd Disneyland here in Virginia. We have off-year elections. Our next cycle was the gubernatorial election in 2017. I said, oh, wow, the backlash to this is going to be massive. Democrats are going to be like, oh, that's what happens when I get complacent. I guess I better vote. And so I didn't make a model yet. I just started talking about, we're going to see college-educated voters flock to the polls in response to this, and they're going to be left-leaning, and they're going to be Democrats that I call latent Democrats, people who are Democrat allegiant but lazy about voting. And we're going to see this blowout election in 2017 here in Virginia, and everyone told me I was nuts because it had always been close here between the parties, and of course that's exactly what happened. So I went back to model it. I wanted to find out, is there something I can use other than, I knew partisanship mattered, like the actual party composition of each district. But what I wanted to see was, did college education serve as a predictor? And indeed it did. And so I used college education and partisanship are my two main predictors. And then I also look at the district's demographics in terms of diversity. So is it mainly white, or does it have some population of diversity to draw on? In most places, it needs that as well. Not everywhere, but in many places. And that's what I can use to identify where was the surge going to come out. And that's really important because you guys will, if you pay attention to the news at all right now, the diagnosis of what happened in 2018 is, moderate Republicans help Democrats flip these House seats that were more moderate or on the swing. And that's the totally wrong diagnosis. That's not what happened at all. What happened was new voters flocked to the polls, and these were Democrats that were lazy about voting, and they were left-leaning independents that had also not shown up to vote in other midterms. And they're the reason that the demographics changed. So it looks like the same voters in suburban areas changed their mind at the 30,000 foot level. But once you dig into the van data like I've done, and what my model predicts is no, it's a surge of new voters. And so that's what I am working on now. I have a subsequent analysis coming out soon that shows that how wrong the conventional wisdom is, and why that's an important lesson for the parties to learn, especially the Democrats, because they're currently constructing their entire 2020 strategy around a conventional wisdom that is not borne out by the data.
That's interesting. Does it matter then who the candidate is?
No, it does matter, especially in these noisy. Here's why it matters, especially because if a party doesn't believe in the candidate, then the party's not going to invest in the candidate, right? So in some ways, like this research that purports to find that moderates do better than progressive candidates, well, some of that has to do with the fact that the party supported that moderate candidate more robustly, right? So some of that is some of it, right? But yeah, I mean, to some degree, you need a good candidate, but a good candidate cannot overcome the district conditions. So take, for example, Amy McGrath, who's announced today that she's going to challenge Mitch McConnell. Last year, when I put out my Senate ratings, I said, look, the Tennessee Senate race is absolute dead on arrival, lost cause for Democrats. Every dime they spend in that Tennessee Senate race is a dime they could spend in Georgia or Texas, where a surge potential is there and they could flip that state. And instead, the Democrats invested $6 to $10 million on that Tennessee Senate race that was never going to flip based on my model. And that's the same story going on in Kentucky. And the reason why is because you've got this conventional wisdom that gets repeated and repeated and repeated by, not just data journalists that aren't using, they haven't updated their analysis, but also all the people who rely on them, that, you can convince these moderate Republicans to come over and cross over. Well, if that was true, we would still have Senator McCaskill, Senator Donnelly from Indiana, and, we might have brought in, Senator Bredesen in Tennessee, because these guys all ran as moderates against much more ideological candidates on the right, right?
So, Rachel, which candidates, which states in particular are battlegrounds for Democrats and Republicans under your analysis? Which are the places people should be focusing on in 2020?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the reasons my model's getting a lot of attention is that it says, look, the Midwest, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, those are all lean blue states that Trump won in 2016, basically by an electoral accident, like the equivalent of a freak accident that isn't likely to replicate in a environment in which Democrats are freaked out and motivated to vote. And so those states in my model go to the Democrats, and thus the electoral college 70 goes to the Democrats. So when I look at my swing states, we're talking about surplus votes for Democrats. And those states are North Carolina, Iowa, Arizona, and Florida. So I have Democrats competing for basically extra votes in those states. And that will depend on Democratic base turnout, not on swaying Republicans over to vote.
Do you think that Texas is in reach at all for Democrats at this point?
So it would be, but only if Democrats were to understand that the fruit of what they should be doing is base turnout, because they underutilize base turnout, and the analysis I'll be putting out will show that even in this surge environment, what they were able to do in most places is match Republican turnout, because Republican turnout surged too, even in places where they ran these blue dog Democrats and tried not to rile up Republicans. Republican turnout surged, okay? And they were able to match it but not exceed it in most places. And they were still underperforming what their potential is in many, many places. No place more than in the Latino population, which fails to reach significance in my model. And it should be significant because of the way that Latinos break in favor for Democrats. And that's because of the massive underinvestment in there. So if they were to go forward and, triple, quadruple, maybe even quintuple the investment that they put currently into there, and they had a good candidate, somebody who could really get young people excited, millennials, that would be a potential pickup for them.
One other question for you. Trump's campaign political strategy is famously base dependent.
Yes.
Do you think that's the right approach for him?
Yeah, well, it has been, in this regard. So Donald Trump, here's the other thing about that. Like the Morning Joe diagnosis or the Chuck Todd diagnosis is, oh, you've got all these Republicans and they're disaffected. Well, that's because they live in this particular bubble in DC, or you do have, and I hang out with them, disaffected moderate Republicans, okay? But out there in America, there is no evidence that Republicans are upset with the Republican Party. In fact, they've rewarded the Republican Party mightily for this strident approach that they've taken on immigration and in other areas that Trump has championed by just enormous turnout gains in 2018. And you have to keep in mind, Democrats are threatened right now. Republicans are living in a world in which they control the presidency and aren't living under that constant threat that Democrats are politically. So it's pretty remarkable that Trump's able to do that. If Trump was just a normal human being and wasn't a walking, talking gaffe machine like he is every single day, and didn't isolate independents, he would maybe be competitive with that strategy. Because you have to keep in mind, where he really runs into trouble with that base turnout strategy is that the fact that he can't hold on to independents because he wants to have Kim Jong-un to the White House for dinner.
Well, thank you, Rachel.
Interesting,
really
Rachel.
interesting.
Great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for letting me talk about my research.
Appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks.
Next up on Rising, YouTuber Natalie Wynn, better known as ContraPoints, talks about the battle for the hearts and minds on that site and how her channel provides counter messaging for far-right extremists and ideologues.
And we dive into the surreal world of deepfakes as deepfakes expert Hani Farid explains how the video technology keeps getting better. All of this when Rising returns.